Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me, as always, is Johan Oberg. Johan, how's it going today?
Hey, Chris. Doing fine, thank you. Excited about this show today because we're talking about energy and innovation. So eager to get started. How's your week been?
Week's been fantastic. I am super excited about the show because so much is going on in the energy transition. You know, in North America, there was, policy that puts money into the industry. There's the public-private partnerships taking place. There's the labs that are doing all kinds of work. And this is really an opportunity to figure out what folks are doing in the public and private sector to really drive the energy transition or projects specifically to make an impact and reduce CO2 and things like that. So this episode to me is near and dear to my heart. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. Any expectations you have from today?
No, I think I come back to what we discussed across, we set up the show to talk about the transition, talk about the ecosystem that are part of this one, because the transition never happens with one actor. It is an ecosystem part. So without being, as you know, the experts on the US side of this one being European, then I'm really curious to see how they approach this and how that ecosystem is being deployed. And, hey, we talk about transition, we're talking about innovation. I think I'm really interested to hear about where it's going. What's happening?
Well, let's dive in then. Let's bring Trish Cozart onto the program. Trish, welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here today.
Well, as Johan and I are famous for saying, is we know a bit about you. We've had conversations with you. We invited you to be on the podcast, but our audience may not know exactly who you are. So perhaps you could just take a little bit of time and tell us who you are and what agency you are a part of.
Yeah, great. So my name is Trish Cozart. I am the director of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is commonly known as NREL, here in Golden, Colorado. We're part of the National Lab system here in the United States. So there's 17 national labs that are part of the Department of Energy's footprint. And NREL is unique among those national labs, and that is it is the only national lab that has a sole mission, and that mission is to work on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and the energy transition, more broadly speaking.
Where are you on that mission? Is this a new project, or is this something that's been around since the 60s, 70s, and we're just kind of shining a light on it now with the current environment?
Yeah, the NREL has been around for more than 45 years. I think we're reaching our 50th anniversary here coming up soon. And so they've been working on tackling renewable energy and those kinds of energy systems for a long time. I think the lights have been shining on it brighter in the recent decade, for sure.
And then the project that we're going to talk about, or the IN2 project, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure, absolutely. And maybe I'll back up just a little bit and tell you about the center at the National Lab. It's unique among all the national labs that we have a center on Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. Certainly innovation occurs at all of the labs, but to have a center that's very externally focused on the clean tech ecosystem is unique. So what we do here is three things. We manage networks of various ecosystem partners. So think of entrepreneurs working in the clean tech space, investors investing in the clean tech space, other incubators, accelerators, and university programs all around the nation working in this space. we convene those networks and have relationships with those networks and work very closely and use that convening power of the national lab to bring those conversations together and get those folks together. And then the third thing we do is we build technology incubation programs on behalf of the private sector and our partners to help move the needle, help them with their own innovation goals, and connect all of those ecosystem partners to have the maximum impact. And one of those programs that you're talking about here was the IN2 program, or that's shorthand for Innovation Incubator, or the Wells Fargo Innovation Incubator, which is funded by the Wells Fargo Foundation.
Which, isn't it? I really looking forward to hear more about that one, because that's something that really triggers us. But if I just may step back one step, I'm just curious in terms of, and here comes my stupid questions again. How is this funded? Coming from a European point of view, you literally have two ways of doing this. One is paid by the government, and then it's clear directions from the government. The second part is more of a community from the corporate side, where the fundings come from the corporates, and sometimes you have something in between. But those are two different ones. So where do you sit around this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it gets back to the whole public-private partnership piece. The lab itself is funded, taxpayer funded, a $15 billion investment into massive amounts of technology and brain power that goes into it. And one of the goals of that from our government standpoint is we want to share that with the people that have paid for it. So by having partnerships with the private sector, with startups, with other people who can utilize those facilities and that expertise in some way, that's how we go out and find additional funding or cost share or programs of people that want to organize around the use of that facility. So that's what the IN2 program is all about.
And are there mission statements that change? So you alluded earlier in your answer that the light's kind of shining more on this decade to energy transformation maybe than the past, and maybe it's just it's front and center for everybody at the moment. But is there a mission statement that changes now? Is there something that's driving different in this version of what's happening than it may be in the past?
I would say that it's always been the mission to advance science in this area for NREL. I think the bubbling up of our center, of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center, and the growing of that is a little bit reflective of that mission growing, more, not necessarily changing. I guess that's the best answer I can give you.
One of the questions, I've worked a lot in these ecosystems built around it, maybe sometimes in energy, but especially what we refer to as IoT and some of the software industry, where we looked at a lot of these, and also with incubators and kind of startup centers. One of the challenges I saw, but also quite the impact and the strength around this, is once you start mixing the different audiences. So you might have a corporate, you might have the academia, you might have the startup mentality. This is different cultures, these are different DNAs, which is great on paper sometimes, but it also creates challenges in the way you work, because some are faster, some have less time, some have more ambition. How do you, as kind of running these incubators, if you're hands-on with them, how do you manage this? Because I see this as one of the bigger opportunities, but also for sure one of the biggest challenges.
Sure. I'm sure you nicely are referring to that governments can be slow sometimes, right? And that isn't, and corporates too, where startups are moving at the speed of light, right? And their timeline is different for good reason. They're trying to feed their families and actually get into market, right? So that is a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge, but we try to set up the program in such a way that our researchers and the time that we have allocated for them to work with them have been pre-planned ahead of time, so that we're not going to run into as much time crunch. And so we've got a system well set up in advance. We know the theme that we're going to make the call for these startups. So in the case of the Wells Fargo program, they're keenly interested in the building sector as well as agriculture. So we already know ahead then and can go talk to that part of the research area of NREL and say, this is coming. Make sure you've set aside some people and labor and time so when they hit the door, we're ready to roll and ready to help these folks as fast as possible. So that's one difference. And you also talked about the difference in mentality between academic or research and the startup world. I think what's been really fascinating and wonderful about this collaboration between, say, startups and then the researchers here at the lab is a lot of the Department of Energy research that researchers here are typically used to doing are very long-term nascent technologies that need a lot of time and exploration over years and millions of dollars and years to develop. So that's one way of thinking as a researcher. When we bring a startup in who's innovating and pivoting and just is a totally different way of thinking for a researcher, first they might be a little reluctant to it at first of getting out of their element, but then they love it. It is one of their favorite projects, even though it is not multi-million-dollar, multi-year, and it's this short period of time, maybe 12 months that they're working with this startup, and not full-time even. The amount of innovation they're exposed to and the collaboration between the two becomes really valuable to both parties.
Maybe I missed this. So you're talking about startups, and I'm a startup guy. I've done a number of them through my career. I'm just in one right now. And I've done some incubators along the way, and I've also been coaching and mentoring there. When we do that, typically there's equity stake that goes in and out of that. How does this work with a public-private partnership? And are you looking for a unicorn, or what are you all trying to do here?
Yeah, that's a great question. The IN2 program specifically that we're talking about is funded through a foundation. So it's philanthropic funding, the Wells Fargo Foundation. So while they are interested in aligning the mission with that of Wells Fargo's main business lines, so for example, Wells Fargo does a lot of mortgage or housing or real estate, lending, and then they also are the biggest ag lender in the United States. So agriculture is inherently important to them. On the flip side, their foundation is interested, especially in sustainability and low carbon solutions. They're really wanting to make sure all of those industries they're interested in are moving towards this energy transition in a positive way. And so the foundation is philanthropically funding the program, and therefore funding with non-dilutive capital the startups going through the program. So they don't take any equity, and the main goal is when we go through the down selection process and choosing who gets to participate in this, the goal of selection is who has a good team, who has a good technology, yes, but whose technology is going to have the greatest chance of having the greatest impact at the end of the day when they come out of this on top in the market.
So which I think it's a really interesting approach. If you take me back a little bit to your role and your position when a project like this starts up, how does it move towards it? So you get in contact with Wells Fargo. Okay, this is a mission that we want to do. How do we then make sure that we bring the people on? Can you go through the process in terms of how you manage this and how it leads then into a specific project?
Sure. So the program's been going on since 2014. So I think it's our 9th year, if I do my math correctly. And the way we have it organized is, again, we do about 2 cohorts a year. So one agriculture, one buildings focused has been the typical cadence. And we put a call out. We actually go to the researchers at the lab and talk to them and say, what's bubbling up? What's novel? What's interesting? Where are there gaps? What are you seeing as researchers who are, really knowledgeable about what's happening in this space? And they may say, HVAC is the most important thing right now. We need to fix that. It's a huge emitter of carbon. We want to work on that. And then 3 years later, they may be saying there is so many HVAC, startups in the system right now. That's not where we need to focus. Let's tweak the call out to startups this time to be a little bit more on materials or something else that we see as impactful. So we actually go to those researchers and really try to figure out where should we angle the theme of this to utilize the lab in the best way possible and fill gaps in the market that we see the best way possible. So we start there. Then we issue the call out to our channel partners. And what our channel partners are is that group of incubators, accelerators, and university programs in the space. So we already kind of pre-filter the calling to that group of 60, which represents more than 6,000 startups in the space. And so we start with that call through them. We get, let's say 100 or 150 or what depends on how narrow the focus of the theme is, 100 startups to apply to the actual program. And we go through a pretty rigorous down selection process that takes 3 months. So it starts with a review by the researchers here at NREL. That cuts the group down to half. Then we go to the Wells Fargo board. They look at it. They cut the group down to half again. And they look at it for more of the business side, as well as is it meeting their philanthropic goals that they're out for. And then one of the things that's the most important part and been, I think, a game changer for the way we pick is this is the last board. And that last board's made up of industry. So we have folks from the buildings industry, everything from housing developers to academics to everything in between of major corporates who are working in innovation to sit and debate whether which of these are going to have the most impact, which are going to have the most possibility of actually getting to market. It's a really interesting conversation at the end of the day, and then we pick the 5. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. That was my follow-up question. How many?
Yes, 5 per cohort typically. We have done some with 10 before. We find 5 to be a nice cadence, just in terms of capacity.
Yeah. What makes a good partnership? So you gave HVAC as an example, or some clean tech or energy savings or CO2 reduction that you can do. But what makes the partnership good? What can the lab offer, and what kind of companies generally start making it through those cuts? Is it the leadership? Is it the engineering? Is it the type of technology? What makes it magic?
Yeah, I think the best ones that come in that make the cut, first of all, their technologies promising, really promising to our researchers and promising for the impact it can make. I think we also are looking for people who are eager to collaborate. So teams that are interested in that collaboration. One of the biggest questions we get from startups is around IP. They're worried that, is NREL after their IP? Are they not going to gain control of their IP? We have never had a problem with that. We typically, we're looking to get things out of the lab and into the market. We're not after equity or IP, or especially their IP that they bring in. Sometimes they've licensed NREL IP that they discover when they get here, but it's not something we're after. We're after creating things that can get out into the market. So that's not typically an issue. So we're just looking for people who have great ideas, usually at that early stage and maybe pre-prototype or prototype stage are a really good fit, because we can do a lot of help with developing designs for that, or helping getting them making a pivot before it's too late. And some of those areas are typically good for us.
So we've done some really broad brushstrokes, right? You've kind of told me this and that, and I've got a kind of warm fuzzy what it is. Maybe success stories or some sharing, maybe more tangible, might help our audience understand as well. Do you have some stories that you're willing to share?
Sure. We have 65 companies that have come through, so it's hard to pick favorites, right? But I'll try. So one that we've been working with for a little while is called Blue Frontier. So they're a air conditioning technology. So it's a completely new way of creating air conditioning for buildings. They use a salt solution to create desert air conditions in a heat exchanger and remove humidity from the air. So that allows them to cool the air via this process called indirect evaporative cooling. So there's two things, the dehumidification of the air and then this indirect evaporative cooling occur within a single heat exchanger. So what we've been doing with them through the program is two major things. First, we help them select or evaluate the non-corrosive salt solution that they use, which is an alternative to the heavy refrigerants used in typical AC units. And as you may know, and a lot of your audience may know, the cooling industry accounts for a lot of global CO2 emissions. I think it's 10%. So it's 3 times the amount produced by aviation and shipping combined. So it's a big area that we can have impact in. And then the second way the IN2 program helped Blue Frontier is to model more than 500 different designs so they could settle on the most optimal design solution to get to market faster. So that was like phase 1 of their project. And then phase 2 of their project here at the lab through IN2, they're continuing working to make that design more efficient, lower the costs, prototype testing and validate those models. And so some of the results so far indicate that they have a lot of efficiency gains. And so we have high hopes for Blue Frontier and where they're going to go.
So is it air conditioning they make, besides using less refrigerant, is it more energy efficient this possible as well? So the CO2 savings is a combination there?
That's right.
Or how are they gaining that kind of savings? Just curious.
Yeah, so they are currently projecting a 60% reduction in energy use and a 90% reduction in peak electrical demand through the desiccant solution that they've got.
So if you could speed that up, because Johan and I spend a lot of time when it gets to be summer here in Europe, they don't really do air conditioning here. And being American, and with the current climate changes, I'm all for air conditioning that is more efficient so we can have it over here too.
Right, and a lot of the world, it's the opposite of that. I'm with you here in Colorado. It's nice and cool. I don't have any air conditioning in my house, but you travel a little bit to the south and everybody has it. You need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a great example. Any others that you could share with us? Can we go a little further into some other your
Sure.
companies you've worked with?
One of the other things we did through the IN2 program is, and I think this is important for innovation generally speaking, is we don't ever rest on our laurels or the fact that just because we've done the program the same way in 2014, that's how we have to do it in 2023, right? We should be as innovative as the innovators in innovating the program. So we actually decided to do a demonstration cohort. So we called for companies to bring a partner to the table with them with a letter of intent that company was going to, or corporation or whoever they were going to work with, was going to cooperate in a demonstration project with the startup. And then the NREL researcher was going to sit as a great third party research operator between the two. So they could advise the startup on how to design or put together the demonstration. They can advise the corporate or the partner on the best way to make the most of that demonstration. And that offered a buffer and also some nice synergies between the 3 parties, like a little triangle. So we brought in 5 companies to do that. One of them was 9 Energy, just as an example. They brought in partners Revel Transit and Fermata Energy in New York City to work on a V2G, so a vehicle to grid technology, where they're actually working with both cars with batteries, electric cars, and the buildings themselves. Being in Brooklyn, with the New York City Fire Department having strict codes of installing big lithium batteries, places that can't be. But, they allow cars with batteries to be parked in parking garages. People in New York City don't do a lot of driving. They park their cars for a while until they want to use them. So why not use these batteries that are sitting in garages as a way to balance the load during the day if they can store during off-peak times and shoot it back in and out to the grid? That's an opportunity. And as you get more fleets of EVs that aren't really personal cars, people look at their cars as a reflection of themselves. If they're going to go buy cars for their own reasons or the color or all of that. But in a fleet of cars, it doesn't matter. It's a utilitarian purpose. So those sorts of cars being parked, those fleets being parked in garages are a great opportunity to be used as batteries for buildings, really, in the future. So that's what one of the companies working in IN2 with NREL and with other partners.
Which I think is a really interesting part, and we've done quite a lot of on electric cars. We have a whole series around this also for the Insider's Guide to Energy, but it's also a very interesting part in terms of the fleet, because I think there is this challenge in terms of ownership also of the battery. A lot of the OEMs now wants to claim that, hey, you buy the car from me, but I want that battery because I want to start utilizing it as part of this transactional changing energy systems. I think it's an interesting approach from a technology point of view, but equally as interesting from a business point of view. Who actually will benefit from this is the owner or the facility owner or the utilities. There's still a lot of things to be panned out there. I would assume.
Yeah, there are, and even the number of cycles a battery can have in its lifetime. If you're using those cycles to shoot it off to the grid or to a building, is that how they want that battery used for the car? And then is the car seller not interested in having the battery used in that way for the life of the car? So I think you're absolutely right. There's a million little details that have to be worked out as these technologies come online. The unintended consequences or the good and the bad will get revealed as technology gets implemented.
Absolutely. So once you've done these projects, so be that a test of the vehicle to grid for fleets or the HVAC that you described in the case before, this is a maturity part of an incubator setup or a collaboration setup in this ecosystem. Sooner or later, I would assume you let them go, let them fly into the market. Where do you draw? I'm curious just to understand a little bit of that process as well. We talked about how you set it up, how you bring them on, the process of selecting the 5 or 10. But sooner or later, they're also a maturity step in terms of into the market. How does that process work? And through the ecosystem that you built up, I would assume that there are also some kind of support at kind of end of life.
Yeah.
That's the wrong word to use probably, but end of your life in
End
terms
of our
of
life.
the incubator part. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we always say once they're in the IN2 family, they never leave, right? We will keep tracking them because obviously we want to know if we were helpful in the success of the company going forward and want to measure that impact on behalf of Wells Fargo and NREL itself. But we also know that it's not one person or one group that actually helps a company. They have so many, they have various investors and advisors. There probably have been in 2 or 3 incubators since the time they were born, as a company. So we see ourselves as one stepping stone on that journey. When I mentioned before that we source these companies from our channel partner network, those are incubators and accelerators already. So we assume a lot of these companies are already getting incubation support more on the business side than on the technical side. So where they might be getting business support from an incubator they're coming from or working with, we're going to provide the technical incubation piece of that puzzle for them. So they're going to piece together all of these different pieces they need from the larger ecosystem. If they come into our program and they're pretty early and they're not connected well with other incubators, we try to help make those connections. So because we know a lot of the ecosystem, we will connect back. That includes raising capital because we are well connected with the investors in the space. We will ask them when they're raising, and then we will let all of our investor folks know that we're connected with, that these companies are raising. We'll put them in front of them in different circumstances or pitch opportunities so that they have those. So we'll do whatever we can. We try to catch up with them even post their projects year after year and say, how can we help you? Can we help you with PR? Can we help you with speaking opportunities? What can we do to help you move further? So we never really let them go, but we do let them go.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is it's interesting economic times, right? So you have the IRA, which is putting money into renewables, and there's it's going to jumpstart the U.S. over just about everywhere in the world, from what I've seen with the projects, as that all comes to fruition. But at the same time, there's supply chain issues, dramatic, banking concerns. There's a lot going on in the world. Are you seeing that ripple through to the cohorts you're looking at right now? And is it impacting philanthropic giving for energy and energy transition, or maybe reducing CO2 or for the agriculture or one of your missions? Is it rippling through yet, or is it not going to?
I think it will ripple through. I think it takes, back to our things take time, especially coming down from regulations or governments or tax credits and those sorts of things. It's such a big piece of legislation. And there's a lot of analysis being done, even here at NREL, on what does that look like? How do we best use that legislation to have the various adders onto those tax credits for different communities or different areas? So how can companies best utilize that opportunity? So I think that's still coming, but there's a lot of excitement, I would say, from the companies we're talking to about seeing those opportunities on the horizon and how that will open up markets for them. So they're very excited about that. On the banking side, on the investment side, there's cycles that always go through, right? And sometimes, investors are more keen and there's money flowing, and then sometimes they're being a little bit safer with it when you see situations like have happened in the recent past here with the banks. So we're probably my guess is we're heading into a cycle of a little more safety and less free flowing as much, but that remains to be seen, I suppose. And in those cases, so we've got on the one side that happening, and on the other side, all of this great legislation happening that's going to help them. So everybody's trying to play both sides and do the best they can, and we'll do the best we can connecting them as we learn more about both of those situations.
Which I think it's interesting, because you're sitting in a very good position in terms of, okay, you got the different things in market that has an impact on this, and you start looking at, throwing money at them or tightening the money, but resources as of yours in terms of incubator, in terms of support from analysts, etc., will always be available in one way if you qualify. Maybe what we look at a lot of the questions in the podcast is the transformation. So we start looking at, okay, what happens moving forward? And you're sitting on such a golden position, because you have this interaction with a lot of the innovators and a lot of these startup companies. Would be interesting just to see your reflection of when you started off a few years ago, let's say 8 years ago, something, when people came to you and says, this is what we want to be part of, these are the companies, and what you're seeing now. Is it increasing the numbers of applications and the interest of being part of it? What is the big changes from the few years ago? Because obviously, if you go back a few years ago, renewable was there, but maybe not as hyped as it is today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you can see it changes with the market being available, right? Because the most important thing for any startup is that they can actually sell something to somebody at the end of the day. So as the market has shifted to more distributed energy, solar, wind, all of those things have become more mainstream or more affordable, you see the startups start building up around those technologies, making them even better or enabling technologies for those. So so energy storage is a good example of that. We've been working on solar and wind for a long time here at the lab. Now that those have become really viable, efficient, and cost competitive options, you see startups working on all the things that support those becoming part of the transition. So more, we have a high number of energy storage technology companies that apply every year to another program I didn't talk to you about was our Industry Growth Forum, which we've been doing for 28 years, which is every spring an event that we run that connects the check-writing, motivated investors with the clean tech startups that are raising capital. So anyone can come to that. They register and come. So that's something we've been doing. And so we watch the trends from year to year of who applies to actually be on stage at that. So anyone can come, but we actually have investors select 40 startups that can present or pitch. So we have 200 investors who review applications and pick the 40 they want to see on stage. And so from those applications that we get every year, we're able to watch trends of which startups are coming in, where the areas of interest are that are being, to your question. And I think right now we're seeing a great, always a lot of grid and solar and energy storage still, because those are where a market is available to them. But then you see a lot of hydrogen companies, for example, cropping up a lot more in the last 2 years. So we're seeing trends as the market shifts, and that as they see potential in those markets, we see more startups in those areas.
So follow up to that one. That's the trends in terms of the actual solutions or solution areas. Curious to see as well, and this is probably my ignorance in terms of the American market, but do you see any regional difference as well? Do you see any regions growing faster, or regions that you haven't seen from before, or?
Yeah, so just regions working in the clean tech system. Is that what your question is?
Correct. So if you start looking at through these number of years that you've been working on it, do you see any? So you said solar and wind, that's been going on for quite a while, and we know that used coming into storage and a few other things. So we see the technology might be shifting and having in terms of trends, but do you also see where they're coming from? So we've had a lot of guests, for example, from Texas,
Gotcha.
which seems to be growing a hubs. We all know Silicon Valley for tech, but do you see any kind of regional interesting trends as well?
Yeah. So one of the things with the Wells Fargo program is they're very interested in diversifying, and diversity is important to them. So when we look for channel partners, we're looking for innovations from anywhere across the United States, not just Silicon Valley, for example. And so we find in that calling and looking under every rock that there's actually innovation coming from. We have startups from every part of the nation, from Minnesota to Georgia to Florida to California, right? There is still a huge concentration in California, no doubt. I would say the major hubs are that Texas-Houston region, which you were referring to, the Silicon Valley, of course, and California. There's also Massachusetts and that New England area, which is a big hub. I would say Colorado has become quite a regional hub as well. You have to point that out, just because NREL is here, but also we have a lot of tech bubbling up in this area as well. But you also see it even that whole Midwestern strip there, especially in the ag tech community. I would say St. Louis is really growing as an ag tech hub. So regionally, yes, we have some different areas that they're focused in on different technologies, but there's stuff popping up all over the place.
So you're getting companies or opportunities for folks from around the U.S. IN2, where is it headed? What's going on next? Where do we go from here? So we got a little glimpse behind the curtain. You told us a couple of your companies and a little bit of success.
Mm-hmm.
You told us what the formula is, and you said lots and lots apply, 6,000, I think, and keep cutting, and you get down to a handful or 10 or whatever gets through the cohort.
Mm-hmm.
Twice a year, I think you mentioned. So where does this go? How does this public-private clean tech partnership work, and what's the future look like?
Yeah, we're hoping it keeps going for years to come, and we keep innovating better ways to deliver value and impact. And so some things that are happening just right close to the future is we have a new cohort coming on through our agriculture cohort in late summer of 2023. That'll get announced. So another 5 companies or more will get to be a part of that and work with IN2. And specifically in their case, they'll be doing their technology assistance and collaboration, not necessarily with NREL, but with the Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis, which is a partner we work with related to plant biology. So that's happening. Another thing is the channel partners. One thing that's unique about the IN2 program that I hadn't mentioned yet is this channel partner network of 60 plus incubators, accelerators, university programs. Is the IN2 also funds those partners to help build up and foster the pipeline of innovation through strategic competitive awards. So we give about $1.25 million a year in strategic awards out to those channel partners to help build up their regional ecosystems and build up the pipeline, the diversity of that pipeline, the ability of their own programs to keep growing clean tech in their areas. We want that pipeline to always be strong. And so that's something Wells Fargo has funded as well, which I think is brilliant, and really kudos to them for doing that.
So I think we're coming up to time. I have to say what I liked about plenty of things. I love the stories around these incubators, the position that you're in, because I think we need more of it. And I like the way that you kind of looked around the regional parts, because I think there's a danger sometimes to not diversify when it comes to this. Be that in terms of region, be that in specific where the money goes to, because there is opportunities around here. Maybe one last little question. You mentioned the network and the flyouts when we let them go. You never let them go, you said. So how many of these organizations are in your network right now that has been growing throughout time? And the final one, which I guess it's for every company, be that as an incubator, the KPIs. So if you're not having table stakes into these companies, how do you measure success?
Yep.
Throughout the years?
So 65 companies have come through so far, and of those, they're all in business today. I know that that's probably not going to stay forever because they're startups, but that's a pretty good record. That's one KPI. I would say the other is we measure it based on follow-on funding. So part of the goal of the program is to de-risk these companies for investment. Hard tech is hard, clean tech is hard, it's slower, it needs more patient capital, it needs that non-dilutive capital. So we want to see if by going through the program at NREL, by going through working with these experts, and it definitely validates for them and for investors that this was a company worth looking at, and that the work they've done at NREL is valuable. NREL's a world-renowned name, so it does bring credit to them, and it does de-risk them for investment. So we look at the investment number. So right now, the companies that have gone through have collectively raised more than $1.6 billion in follow-on capital since finishing their IN2 program. That could be because our program and the collaboration was so valuable and it de-risked them. We also pick really well through our selection process, so that's part of it, but we think that's a great measure as well. We also look at jobs. As you know, startups are the technology and economic engines of the world, and so there wouldn't be jobs created if there weren't for startups, and so there would be more jobs lost than created. So we look at how many jobs have been created from each of these companies since starting the program.
It's been an amazing journey on this episode. I really got a little glimpse of the lab, what it would be like to be in a lab in Golden, Colorado and working, or in St. Louis working with you. I want to thank you for taking the time to share with our audience what you all are doing and shedding light on the public-private partnership and the opportunity for companies that are doing things that are cutting edge to really get the resources and access to quite an expensive lab that perhaps a smaller company couldn't get access to, or the talent and the experience that the team has at the lab. So thank you so much for joining us in Insider's Guide to Energy Day. It's been a pleasure, Trish.
Thank you.
For our audience, you've enjoyed another episode of Insider's Guide to Energy. If you like this content, please share it. If you're in a startup or someone that should be going through this incubation process or going over to the labs, please share this episode, like it, follow it. And we look forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye-bye.